You were just mentioning that not everything is happiness right now around creative cities, but also if we look at it historically, the creative class is sometimes associated with displacement and gentrification patterns. In the book Inequalities in Creative Cities by Gerhard et al., mentioned that the creative cities movement is affecting city demographics and land use put together with socioeconomic consequences. Besides, in your last book, you highlight how the new elite groups advocate for some specific trends like yoga and organic food. These are practices that might do no harm to society, but at the same time, they illustrate the increasing inequality in the US, where most people couldn't afford this new lifestyle. Inequality plus informality has always been a critical issue in Latin America, and lately the social political consequences have surfaced and translated into social crises around the region, advocating for welfare and quality of life. What are the recommendations you would like to give to urbanists and decision makers working with creative cities and creative districts to do things differently and to contribute to more inclusive and equal cities? In other words, how do we build back better for all in the creative arena?
This is an excellent question, and I have two caveats before I respond. The first is this is, of course, enormous. This question, this concern of inequality, it permeates so much of society, and to talk about creative industries and artists would not do the subject and the issue justice. But for the purposes of my expertise and time, I will focus primarily on creativity. The second thing is that creative class is distinct from what I study. The creative class is a much more all-encompassing group of people. And they are, I understand these tensions that are spoken of, that, you have lawyers who are part of the creative class or computer scientists who are part of the creative class, and they make much more money than even other members of the creative class, and that there's this concern of their role in gentrification in cities. Because they have more money, they can pay more rent, they demand different businesses, and they push people out, or so the story goes. Artists, I think, are a different part of the story. They're often the exploited part. They often go into historic neighborhoods that are run down because that's all they can afford. And the same is true of immigrant communities as well, who come to America. They come to Los Angeles or New York, and they move into certain neighborhoods. They are working their way up and making a living, and they are like the artists. They are pioneering, and that these neighborhoods where they set up shop often, particularly major global cities, with the tides of gentrification, they get pushed out, or their rent goes up. And so the thing that's really, really important is, I am someone who studies economic development. I believe economic development is very important. We want it, but we need to protect the people who are there already. We need to frankly protect the people who made those neighborhoods so interesting and so revitalized in the first place. And so that's an essential part of not just our duty as a society, but also in a very practical sense, our duty to preserve the creativity and vibrancy of these neighborhoods. If we move people out who actually establish them, the neighborhood will cease to be what made it, the neighborhood that drew so many others. So I think, in a practical way, we need to think about renter protections, support of historical small businesses. We need a way in which we protect people, even as the rich or the upper middle class move in, and make sure that they are allowed to stay put if they want to. There is a larger story, and this is something I discuss in my last book, The Sum of Small Things, that we have a cultural capital problem certainly in America. I'm most an expert, so I wouldn't want to speak, out of turn with other places. But I know in the United States that the inequality around access to cultural capital is also a way in which mobility is stymied. Your access to knowledge, to social networks, things that in some ways seem ostensibly free are not free at all. And the newspapers you read and the podcasts you listen to and the people who can write letters of reference for your college applications, that they are all very hard to access if you do not have the means, or at least to access those resources that are so important to get into university, to get the right job, and so forth. And so I think inequality can be seen on many different scales. So we can see it on a very physical sense in our neighborhoods, but then also there is a larger cultural inequality that permeates not just our neighborhoods, but our country. Finally, I think we need to make sure we protect the people who make our cities creative and interesting. They are artists, but sometimes they are people who have lived in a neighborhood for many generations. Sometimes they are immigrants coming to make a living, who help shape and inform our city's identity and culture and uniqueness. And the fact that they do this is so critical to the success of our neighborhoods and cities. We need them, and so we need to support them.